After the Demon King selection, the Yoo Joong-hyuk Industrial Complex became busy with reconstruction. The citizens' expressions were dark from the dangers of war. The atmosphere would have been harsher if it wasn't for the relief resources that I persuaded Bi-hyung to give. The clock tower's over there. Hey, watch out over there. Due to the deaths of the dukes, the citizens of the industrial complexes came over, and I wasn't lacking manpower. I spent 2 days helping the citizens rebuild, and the city was gradually regaining a lively atmosphere. Thank you for the help, Yoo Sang-ashi. The foundation reconstruction would have taken a longer time if it weren't for Yoo Sang-a's Ariadne's web. Yoo Sang-a wiped the sweat off her forehead and replied, "You should take a break, Dokshashi." "I'm fine. What about Yoo Sang-ashi?" Yoo Sang-a looked closely at the bandage wrapped around my chest while answering, "I'm good as well." Good. It was a word used by Yoo Sang-a. I stopped working as I climbed the clock tower with Yoo Sang-a and looked down at the square. Yoo Joong-hyuk and the other seriously injured party members were hospitalized in Eileen's ward. Jung Hee-won and Lee Ji-hee were relatively well and helped with the reconstruction of the industrial complex. Meanwhile, Lee Hyung-sung was demanding to be discharged from the ward because he was all better. Thanks to the hard work over the past 2 days, the square area started to feel like a place where people lived. The schedule was tight, but the things I was doing now would be returned to me as a reward. They came. A portal had appeared in the air. There was a kid running at great speed from one side of the square. I lightly jumped down the clock tower and greeted him. "Doksha-hyung! Ah!" Lee Gil-young struggled in my arms. I smiled and patted his head. "Have you been well? You seem a bit taller." "Really?" "Yes, you're almost around Yoo-sung's height now." "I'll be bigger soon." It wasn't just Lee Gil-young who came through the portal. A large man fell to the floor of the square with a thud. "It's been a long time, Gong Pil-du-shi." "Ugh!" Gong Pil-du stared at me like he didn't care about my safety and then waved to Yoo Sang-a. Yoo Sang-a bowed her head with a slight smile and Gong Pil-du spoke in a slightly more relaxed tone. "I didn't come to see you." During this time, Gong Pil-du had changed a lot. Who would call him one of the 10 evils now? Han Soo-young? "I think she needs some time to recuperate," Lee Gil-young answered with his head against my stomach. Recuperate? She had offered the Abyss Stones as a sacrifice, but the damage wouldn't be small because she took the Black Dragon into her body. However, to not come here. "Ah, Soo-young Nuna told me to give this to you." Lee Gil-young rummaged through his pockets and handed me a note. It was a crumpled piece of paper that gave off an obstinate impression similar to Han Soo-young. I carefully opened the note while avoiding Lee Gil-young's glistening eyes. "I will kill you if you make me do it again next time." I couldn't help laughing. Indeed, there was a reason she hadn't come. If I closed my eyes, I could still see the bandaged Han Soo-young laughing like crazy. There are still a few problems left. The note contained some other information. There were things about the Korean Peninsula and the nebula that could only be heard on Earth. Fortunately, the situation on Earth didn't deviate much from the original cycle I knew. In fact, most of the information were things I already knew and didn't need to be conveyed. Han Soo-young knew this and struggled with eloquence. "Anyway, that's it. Well, goodbye, idiot. See you when you come to Earth." It was too bad. I was going to tease her properly if we met this time. I put the note in my coat and told Lee Gil-young and Gong Pil-du. "There will be a party at midnight. Go wash up and prepare." "Party?" "Guests are coming." I passed one crisis, but the crisis of this industrial complex was just beginning. The constellation God of Wine and Ecstasy has accepted your invitation. The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring has accepted your invitation. I saw numerous indirect messages pouring in and sighed lightly. Since the selection, Yoo Joong-hyuk hadn't woken up. How long will it take for him to recover? It should take 2 more weeks. Eileen checked Yoo Joong-hyuk's posts, walked out of the hospital room and glanced at me. "You need to rest well, do you know?" "Don't worry." Eileen left, but I stayed in Yoo Joong-hyuk's hospital room. The sleeping man's complexion was paler than any Yoo Joong-hyuk I had ever seen. It was natural. This was the first time that Yoo Joong-hyuk didn't regress, despite suffering injuries serious enough to trigger regression. I stood up and checked the story packs that were stuck to him. Sometimes a story pack being inserted incorrectly could cause death from side effects. It might be different if he had the Lamarck Curin like me. Packs like these are being plugged in. I am going to a lonely world. The Swordmaster was the easiest. I was a genius ever since receiving the sword at 5 years old. Fortunately, Eileen was a story expert and had a good grasp on the composition. In fact, Yoo Joong-hyuk of the 144th round briefly went crazy after receiving Lee Hyung-sung's army story. He's a picky guy. I was almost shocked by the voice suddenly heard behind me. I looked back and saw a handsome giant leaning against the wall. Since when were you there? From before you came in. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint stared down at me with calm eyes before indicating Yoo Joong-hyuk. It's too much healing. Just throw a few Mirum dumplings at him and he'll get better soon. It's because there are no Mirum dumplings here. Despite the words, the eyes of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint were still very mild. Then the terrible man's voice was heard. So he's the one who beat you up? Something the size of a frog was hanging upside down from the ceiling opposite the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. It was Kyrgios Rodgrame. Master? Tell me, is it this guy? I was reminded of the nonsense I spoke to send Kyrgios to Mirum. I was beat up by the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's disciple. Kyrgios's handsome eyebrows curved, and the aura of electrification appeared around his entire body. Was it all a lie? I gulped and opened my mouth. It wasn't completely a lie. In fact, I'm not on good terms with this guy. I was actually beaten up. You were just beaten up. Of course, I hit back. It was a loophole in the system, but I didn't lie because I had beaten up Yoo Joong-hyuk in the Absolute Throne battle. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint made an intrigued expression as she listened to the story. You beat my disciple? Then who won? The gazes of the new teachers met in the air. It was only their gazes that collided, but the sense of space seemed to distort and sparks flew. I thought the two of them were getting along better with each other, but it seemed to be my mistake. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's voice was cold. That's a stupid question. Just looking at the face, it's obvious that my disciple is better than yours. My disciple can't be weaker than an aura parasite who only raises muscle. Don't look down on my vision of martial arts. Your martial artists are getting smaller. I thought the hospital room would explode if this continued and quickly stepped in between the two of them. I have something to ask you. The fearsome gazes shot towards me at the same time. I raised my status and barely endured the pressure. What happened to the first Mirum? I was curious. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Kyrgios were here, so I knew Mirum was likely to be safe. However, the opponent was an outer god. The first one to speak was Kyrgios. This body moved personally, and you think I can't save one world? Kyrgios flew out the window like he was offended. What was wrong with him? The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint gazed at the window that Kyrgios had disappeared through and replied, We stopped it, but it is hard to say that we stopped it. Did you defeat the outer god? The aura of a giant story could be felt from the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's body. It was clearly a giant story associated with the first Mirum. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint nodded. It was a daunting opponent, but it wasn't something I couldn't fight. That unlucky paradox was also present. Only the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint could describe an outer god as a daunting opponent. The problem was the next guy. The outer gods also had ranks. So to speak, there were different names for them. For example, Old One and Great Old Ones. He was neither old nor a great old. However, there were also distant beings beyond such categories. I have never seen such an existence, so I can't explain it clearly. The only thing certain is that Paradox and I together couldn't beat it. In fact, it wasn't even a fight. If it hadn't withdrawn itself, we would have disappeared from the universe along with Mirum. Words of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint were strange. According to the development of the original novel, there was no such possibility that an outer god would appear in First Mirum that day, yet such a great outer god appeared and withdrew. It disappeared like it found another delicious prey. A being that was neither an old or a great one, an outer god that forced strong people such as the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Kyrgios to freeze. A small party was currently in progress in the central hall of the industrial complex. The recovered party members had gathered. The symbolic bodies of some invited constellations could be seen. Demon King of Salvation, did you receive the gift I sent? Persephone approached with a mischievous smile. Once again, her symbolic body took Yoo Sang-a's appearance. The party members stared at her symbolic body with surprise. In particular, Yoo Sang-a's expression was a delight to see. I don't like garter belts anymore. Persephone wore a Chinese dress and waved her fan while laughing. Is that so? It was a pretty good performance. Lee Hyung-sung's ears pricked up at the word performance. I spoke quickly before the wrong words came out. I am indebted to you regarding the selection game. I didn't do anything. I know that you persuaded the master of the skywalk. Now Olympus was in a divisive state. If she hadn't persuaded Hermes, I might have had to fight more Olympus constellations in the competition. Oh, think of it as an investment in the future. The smiling Persephone headed to the center of the hall and started dancing. She even pulled Yoo Sung-ah over as her partner. At first, Yoo Sung-ah was embarrassed, but then she kept a cool expression. Jung Hee-won whistled. Yoo Sung-ah, she is cool. Dionysus had already finished his 10th drink in the corner while Chok Jong-yong was sharing a cup of soju with the brash swamp predator. It was a small party, but it was more relaxed than any other party I had attended. It is a precious break. Congratulations, Demon King of Salvation. I turned back and saw an old man in a formal suit. You came, mass production maker. He was also one of the constellations who helped in the selection. I saw your story well. The Gourmet Association is making a huge fuss. You're overpraising me. I grabbed a glass from the table and bumped cups with the mass production maker. It was pretty strong alcohol based on the smell, and I poured it into my mouth. We were silent for a moment. Perhaps the mass production maker was choosing his question. The question was why he and the other constellations attended this party and why I held it. The mass production maker sipped the alcohol before speaking. You got the qualification of the end, so the filtering should be turned off. I could feel a fine change in the atmosphere. I nodded. That's right. The hall was still buzzing, but the eyes of the constellations gathered one by one on me. Persephone, Chok Jong-yong, Dionysus, everyone was pretending not to care, but they were listening to this story. The gazes of all the constellations focused on me, and the mass production maker asked, Can I ask what your was?